Myths and legend, history and hysteria, religion and the far reaches of the occult. These and more are the children of a common thing, belief, an intrinsic part of what makes us human. I'm your host, Liam Lykos, an independent scholar of esoterica and eccentricities, a rational skeptic, father of two, writer, and lover of life. Pull up a chair, fellow lamplighters, and let us cast the shadows back a bit as we examine what lies beneath the light of Occam's lantern. Welcome back to Occam's Lantern. Tonight is our second attempt at storyteller sessions, where I will be reading a collection of my own writings this time, and oh boy, does this one require a bit of a preamble. I already recorded these, I hesitate to call them short stories, because they are by themselves extremely short. More narrative poetry than anything, but back to the point. I recorded these before making this introduction, and I peppered in breakpoints between each, discussing what led to their creation, what I was attempting at the time, and how each entry kind of evolved what I was doing with the writing as a whole. I hadn't actually put very much attention to these since their initial writings. I believe I started in January of 2019 for the first three at least, and jumping ahead to 2025 for the last two. Now, I got very emotional at these last two because it was a stark recollection of not only my own shift in mental health for the better, but the message that came out in the fifth entry resonated very deeply with me in this current leg of my creative journey, especially when it comes to the podcast. So I stopped recording immediately after that entry and came back to do this intro and to finally record the outro after this. In a way, this entire episode became an emotional ritual, a clarion call, an exercise of will. I knew coming into this that it would be a fun experience one way or the other, and I really hope you listeners get something from this as well. No news this week, as I'm recording this pretty shortly after our last episode on monsters. Now, if you haven't heard that one yet, please go back and listen. And as always, feedback, likes, comments, shares, every bit helps. And so without further ado, let's begin the descent into the Daemonomicon. Last interruption, I swear, before the episode proper, so something cool and unforeseen happened with recording this. I ended up doing it all in one take, beginning to end. I wrote it out of sequence, assuming I'd be taking breaks and we'd cobble it together and edit, re-record, but recording while taking video hit me like a muse, and somehow I powered through it all without taking a break. As such, there are a few short blank sections where I removed audio from coughs to clear my throat, went back to re-speak any lines I might have stumbled across, and the audio quality here and there does get a bit clippy. But I refuse to re-record those parts, so to keep it one solid piece of work. Now, small trigger warning, there are very scant two references to playing the short game, if you catch my drift. But nothing detailed, nothing in depth, definitely necessary to the story, I think. So yeah, enjoy the ride, warts and all. January 6th, 2019. Entry number 1. Abandon. Abaddon. The idea of loss is a pale, blurry shadow compared to the reality of it all. You can bake up scenarios, sketch out situations, plan for the worst, but Until it happens, nothing in the world can prepare you for it. And it would be bad enough alone, but loss is not a solitary hunter. It's a pack animal. It's an extrovert extraordinaire and the apex predator of the heart. We all experience it in one way or the other, but more often than not, it is never a head-on collision. It's a glance, a gaze, a bumped shoulder in a crowded room that causes you to stumble, but nothing more. When loss truly strikes, it's a sledgehammer. It's the opening salvo of a torrent of catastrophe that absolutely no one recovers from. My first true encounter with loss was a rather trope-heavy affair, and I suppose it lessened the impact with that level of familiarity. I was laid off 2 weeks before Christmas, with no warning, no safety net in place. That stung. It was a blow to my ego and a strain on my family, but I kept my head up and soldiered on, straight into the ruinous arms of a house fire. The odor of hot plastic, untraceable to my paranoid prying, but by the time I'd found the source, the crackling white-hot agent of loss had become an unmanageable inferno, claiming most everything I had. And so it went. The jaws of loss have lacerated my life. The pack still howls, but what is there left but marrow and tears? What more could there be to satiate the wolves who hunt the poor fool first bloodied by that harrowing herald of hopelessness? There was no one left that would hear the question, so I sought answers by taking the easy way out. And as the trigger drew back and the hammer clicked hard, the answer came in an unexpected form. A voice in my head, a face in the mirror, not my own. Shh. The sound of rustling, bone-dry leaves that predate winter's first snow. You still draw breath. You still have sight. So many more have less than you. So many more have not had as much as I to lose. My voice shook with scarred arrogance and vitriol both. To hell with everyone and everything else. Whatever fool spoke of love and loss was well and truly in the scores of the have-nots, my mind insisted to my heart. The face sneered a skeletal grin as the rattling voice echoed into my mind. Born as bones, and not a treat. What else but the rich should I eat? My stomach lurched as the hallucination took an unseen turn. This was no mere reflection of self-pity or harbinger of suicidal intent. What? My voice shuddered as I drew breath into constricting lungs. Oh, you have been a treat, but the flavor stales, and I require something fresh. Was there ever a face to accompany the red pen lights where the eyes should be? Or was this haunting specter merely eyes and intent from the beginning? No. You will serve a different purpose now, ceasingly succulent one. A horse to Troy, my verbose boy. So it was that my loss was truly and finally complete. Hooks dug deep, a marking upon bone. No scraping of flesh would see it cast off, until I inscribe it upon another. So this one was based very loosely on an incident where I was, as previously stated, laid off weeks before Christmas. No warning, just a, hey, we're downsizing. And after I had just installed multiple new computers and workstations at the job, the boss was a clueless old lecturer and was bringing in a group of women from one of his closing brick-and-mortar stores to be closer with them. I had a lot of venom towards the situation, but the very next day that I was home when I would have been at work, I smelled burning plastic and found smoke rising from an outlet. Fast thinking, I flipped the power breaker, called the fire department, and got me and my toddler at the time safely outside and into the car. Disaster was averted, and it got my mind just twisted and ruminating on the what-ifs of the situation. That, coupled with the rest of the situational dread and loathing, manifested itself into this writing, the first of what would become the Daemonomicon. What I fancied at the time was a collection of loosely tied together short stories telling a grander fiction of these demon-like entities entering and hijacking people's lives. As you'll be able to tell, the narrative form shifts a bit, and as it gets deeper into the entries, it fades in and out from more of a first-person journey through the suffering into, well, it's hard to say without really giving it away, but with that, we move on to the second entry. Not my favorite of the bunch, but still a good example of the subtle shifts in styles. And here's entry number 2. January 16th, 2019. Belittle. Belial. A lot of people like to use phrases like bottom of the barrel and the ever so popular bottom dropping out. Like that free fall from having to have not is the worst part. No, it's not. Far from it. Not even close. Worse than the loss is the struggle back up. The grasping and clawing for the surface, for air, but it doesn't come. Not easily, and certainly not with any alacrity. And when you finally do find a ledge, and your fingers are worn to the bloody bone, and your lungs are on fire from what strained purchase they could find, you take a second to look up. Horror, misery, and anger equally wrench your mind when you behold that you haven't even gained an inch in progress, and worst yet, time is running out. It can be hard to tell, and here, every moment is an eternity. For some, it's better to rot at the bottom. Others don't have the luxury of that decision now. When you've got dependence, when you've still got purpose, that's the worst case scenario. I'd rather lose everything than lose only enough to still require that I rise again. But here I am, ragged flesh and all. Fortune was not so kind. Fate was not cruel enough. It is thoughts like that that truly cleave at your heart here, but we are in this together, counting every moment, every eternity. What makes it harder is the very fact that we aren't alone in the struggle. And that would be too easy. If you were alone, if you were alone, you could assure yourself, set your eyes upward and soldier on. But the climb is filled to the brim with others who wear the signs of your future, others who tell tales with but a gaze of pain and suffering that you too will endure. And when a shell of what once was a person, ripped asunder through the cycle of hope and revocation, glances into your still proud soul and whispers, Tu fui ego eris. You know the intent without ever understanding Latin. What they are now, soon you will be. Every moment an eternity.
Better to let go, you miserable scum.
A rumbling, deep voice shakes your bones.
Far greater souls than you have tried and failed. Abandon everything and disintegrate to dust. Take the easy way out, worm.
The calling reverberates through your skull, every syllable humming and thrumming like a dentist's drill held to your crown. And just when you're about to let your splintering fingertips release, you hear them. The ones you love, the ones who love you, that need you. But everyone eventually comes to the truth. The thing riding your back and demanding your descent is the same thing whispering your hope. It's all a game to them. A game I have only recently begun to play, but already know far too well. Every moment an eternity. So this one kind of reframes the original. I don't know if that was an intentional part or not, but the whole carving it into another line in the first one kind of came across in retrospect as sort of a creepypasta killer angle. And when the intent was just to pass the story into the mind of someone else, not do any literal carving, I think I started to get into that frame of reference with this one. It's also around the time that I really had to reassure those around me that this wasn't how I was actually feeling. The feedback I received was very Dead Poet Society, and I was dealing with anxiety and moderate depression at the time, so I don't blame them. But the catharsis was the point of these, not to simply muddle in the murk, as it were. On to part 3, March 22nd, 2019. Nothing. Namtar. Austerity and pain are joyous comforts compared to what truly awaits at the end. A torment as sweet as endless despair can only be dreamed of by those who cast the furthest reaches of this subconscious abyss. When dreams cease, nightmares fade, and the only thing we feel is a distant memory of the abstract concept we cradle of a shadow we used to call sensation. Numbness. It's all you know when the end has come. When attrition has failed your hollowing heart, and your constitution has long since wavered, it is the cold complacency of numbness that will wrap you in its loving arms. But such an embrace is something you cannot undo. The contract writ in the abhorrent design of mind's final insanity is inescapable, and cannot be amended by the most thorough and studious of lawyers. It's not a chill that creeps past your spine after dread has raised your hackles. It's the feeling of sinking when the dread has yet to set in. The zero moment right before the glass shatters. The frozen spectacle playing inside the eyes of a deer before an incoming car. Trapped in an infinitesimal moment that spans beyond the most unimaginable vast vistas that our imagination can conjure. There's nothing. but it's worse than everything, than anything. And when you beg for the hammer to fall, for the pendulum to split your brow, for Damocles' sword to descend, the void shall not even whisper an utterance declaring otherwise, for there was never a chance for such a sweet truth that the other demons so boldly promised. And where continues verbiage of other demons to rattle their warnings and strike true your plight? Not but a lung's worth of breath is all it takes to describe the nothing. For no thing can, and no thing will. There is only nothing. Funny enough, I just watched a movie recently. I won't name it to avoid spoilers, but they decided to name a demonic entity Nothing. And it did remind me of this entry. I think this is probably one of the shortest of the entries and was almost a transitional story between the second and fourth entries. As such, I don't mind it as much as I did Belial, though reading it out loud, the wordplay was quite fun. Another interesting thing to note is the shift away from first-person narration. This was highly intentional, as in my mind the narrator had, by this point, completely lost himself. You'll see that begin to shift again in our next entry before bringing it home with the fifth and, so far, final entry. And so with that, here's Daemonomicon Entry 4, written much later as I attempted to kickstart my creative endeavors. November 4th, 2025. Deluge. Dantalion. After the Hollow, when there's nothing left, you find yourself clawing at the roots of your desolation, trying to seek shelter, salvation, sanctuary. You dig deep enough at the darkness and you start to notice them. Motes of light, suggestions of sound, pulses of warmth in the cold. Hope. What a poisoned word that is. You've dug your well into the darkness, and now the water you sought begins to seep in. A trickle, a flow, a stream, a river, a deluge. Overwhelming, washing away the desolation of the drought in a torrent of salt. Shadows of those around you turn into bright beacons, pulsing with everything you wish you had. They offer a helping hand, a kind word, a sincere gesture, everything you crave and need, but when you reach out, lend an ear, rely on their help, that's when the delusion shows its true face. Corrosive dust, shadows, and fetid mires are all that you can have. The others build opulent towers and offer words of hope and healing. You watch as the masses consume the miracle cure displayed, but the moment you attempt to follow them, you're trampled by the reality of ashes that are accumulated at your feet. How silly you were to think that it was remotely tied to the element of life. Water, even salinated beyond the point of consumption, has its use. Maybe the daydream of floating to the surface on its briny morass crossed your mind. But alas, the shadows and dust that lie beneath are nothing but death, pure and simple. The deluge does not falter, bombards you with the visions of a bright future, a better tomorrow, a world that functions at a level of satisfaction and purpose that you once grasped to as a possibility. Your will begins to snap, your focus falters, and the illusion is all that's left. Your soul absolutely begs for a return to the isolation of the nothing. but the clarion calls of the deluge overwhelms your senses. Litanies of false hope bellowed so brightly that your ears began to bleed. You watch the masses trying to follow in vain, and you wither to each touch, each offer of help, just another claw rending away what little you thought you had. Faces you thought you knew distort into reflections of the demons that came before. The revelation is all that remains. Yeah, that entry was a purge point when it seemed like every single thing I attempted to create or do went absolutely nowhere. A sentiment I still wrestle with, but with a readjustment of medications mercifully purging the excessive emotions from the equation, leaving me with only realistic disappointment from failed endeavors instead of rumination and rot. As much as those close to me don't always get my dark humor, I promise I am smiling while saying that. Now, what I didn't think of until now was that just a short while before writing this one, we had a flooding disaster that almost cost us our house, but ended up being a bit of a reset as the insurance hit and turned into a sort of mini renovation for the house and a reevaluation of what was truly important. I don't recall if the use of the word deluge was an intentional reference to this, but I don't think it was. The next, and so far last, entry to the unfinished series is a marked turning point. It was with this next entry that I finally grasped the vision of the series in whole again. No longer brooding purge poems, I saw a chance to tell my own story of kind of a Dante's Inferno. This being that fell into the deepest pits of what looked, for all intents and purposes, to either be a demonic onslaught or possibly entirely a struggle of mental health in his own despair, and the journey back up, weaponizing this evil that tormented them and turning them into boons to aid in his ascent. Kind of a warlock, Diablo-esque, taking these evils, taking these torments, and turning them into power. And so with that in mind, here is entry number 5, Revelation, Realm. As the ashes rise to the apex, the taste of salt and sorrow turns your soul into a shriveled husk. It is then that the 4 demons that have led you to this desolate existence begin to sing in harmony. Everything and nothing, neglect and degradation. Why is this happening to you? Why do the masses seem unaffected? What happened to you? When did you switch from seeing out your own eyes and in simply watching the chaos? Didn't you used to have a voice, a face, a purpose? You test your desiccated tongue. Your eyelids twitch and threaten to close over what used to be your eyes. The ringing in your ears begins to level out. Yes. Was that your voice or something else? A hoarse echo issued from a ragged throat resembled the cry of a blackbird. Yes. The echo responds from the edge. You're in the eye of a storm, but cannot fathom the concept of respite, despite the thrumming ache in your every atom. Why? The voice cracks, and you feel salty water touch your face. Why? The echo responds, less desperate and more inquisitive than the initial chirp. The indignity of it breaks everything. Your eyelids slam shut and the tears come at last. Why? Does it have the audacity to ask that? After everything, After all that we've been through, after you've followed all the words I have written and that you have read, after all this suffering, this emptiness, this dread, it asks of us why. Why the hell is this happening? The words rip the curtains aside, and a coughing fit racks our bones. And as the tears hit, the stagnant air begins to shift. A black wind howls, answering once where the echo would. Thunder rings from above, the most natural sound you've heard in ages. I have a voice still, and with it, I scream. Wow. So, yeah, there you have it. And I must say, I am really glad to have done this, and am grateful for the outlet that is this podcast. I actually started recording on my phone video. I don't even know why I did that to begin with, other than to get some clips or something, but I'm really glad I had. I'm going to be uploading this video to YouTube, see how that goes. Wow. So, recording this helped to remind me I didn't necessarily start this to get famous, because, I certainly wouldn't fight that. I started this to leave something behind. Something for my kids, my friends, my family. Something to say that I was here, and a place to deposit all the things in my head just clamoring for air. My interests, my studies, something to say, this is me. It wasn't just social media and sound and fury signifying nothing. I truly appreciate those of you who return to the Lamplighters Circle each episode, and to those of you new to this journey, welcome to the light. On that note, I do hope you will join us next time as we do our first episode of Delving the Deep, and we take a good long look at the adversary, Tiamat, Apep, Ahriman, Coyote, Loki, Anansi. We give the devil his due, with interest, of course. Until then, keep the fire stoked and the lanterns full. This has been Liam Lykos, and you've been listening to Occam's Lantern.